more and more technology and industrialization. That's just not working. And that's the current, that's what the dominant system says, as somebody said, well, we'll in effect find a magic bullet, just more technology, and hoping that we forget that it's so much the technology that's produced the problem, but there are other ways to describe it, but it just seems like these, as things do get worse, it just behooves us to question these things, and it isn't the theory that is informing people, it's the reality. That's...
Is it back to the land movement?
Well, yeah, reconnecting with the earth. And actually, another answer that some people have is that it's, and I find this fascinating, I don't really know what it means all that much, I like it. I like somebody in Croatia said, I think this movement, she called it a movement, is essentially spiritual. And maybe that's what's been missing. I don't know, I'm not, I know people wouldn't accept that, but it means all kinds of things. But to talk about wholeness that is not a divided self, and not because of complex society, division of labor, to talk about reconnecting with the earth, to talk about unmediated life, that's to me, that's spiritual. And those are basic things about the condition. Other people would say, no, that's not spiritual. Well, I don't know, but that's another way to put it, I think, which is maybe very, very key. I don't know. Along those lines, I found it very interesting, my own discovery, to think of an anarchist reference here. It just shows, at least for myself, that you can have these categories or images. In other words, what I've found is some of the most kind of ferocious black bloc young anarchists are sometimes the most spiritual of all, and they didn't, but we haven't been allowed to really connect with that and include that or base things on that somehow. And again, I'm not saying I know what it means. Anyway.
Please, gentlemen, you have a short, yeah.
Since you're using the word primitivist, I'm also kind of new to this, and I'm just wondering, do you see ideally living in like clans or groups of 50 people in the woods as a hunting and gathering society? Is that what you see as being ideal, or is it more just a broad questioning of and it could perhaps be that permaculture is a possibility as well, really not living in living in human built shelters and growing our own food and stuff, but in a way that doesn't have any pollution and is very low on energy.
Well, we don't have a 10-point program or a 5-year plan. And I'm only speaking for myself anyway. I'm not trying to say this is the party line or something like that. But I do think, for me anyway, that would be the ultimate goal, forager, some kind of foraging life, because if domestication is so key, the turning point there, which Jared Diamond calls the worst mistake in human history, is such a deep change. Whereas for so long, the different Homo species survived by taking what nature gives, to put it in simple terms. And then there was a shift to controlling and dominating nature and domesticating and the whole thing, which ends up with cloning and genetic engineering and nanotechnology and the whole brave new world.
Okay.
That's, as Paul Shepard points out, the first step. The rest of it is implicit. It starts, there's an inner logic to that goes right up to now. And I think that's, I think that's true. So, yeah, I think ultimately, not overnight, of course, that would be, there's no way to do that overnight, of course not, but something in that direction that would be much more healthy. And the band society thing, there have been people, maybe you know who this is, Bernard, wasn't there somebody who said the upper limit of society in which people do take responsibility for each other and really have community is something like, what, 200 or something like that? Or Who
I
said
did
that?
see some fairly low figure
Uh-huh.
in terms of face-to-face communication and
Mhm.
collaboration for all the spheres of life. It's a low figure typically.
Oh, please, it's your turn.
Oh, sorry, pretty much that had the same question, but now that you kind of answered that, I wonder if, like for a lot of people, just to go back to subsistence farming would be a huge step. But if agriculture itself is the worst mistake ever made, it's let us down this path. In terms of how much, I mean, no one really knows how much time we have, I think, before collapse happens or major disintegration. But, I mean, just, I'm asking you or anyone else who might have ideas about this, do you think that taking a strong step backwards and perhaps a lot of people becoming subsistence farmers in an effort to sort of rewind would be a useful step? Or do you think it's just past that and anyone who's seriously interested in surviving should just sort of run for the hills and learn how to wildcraft and hope that when 20 years from now or 10 or when 2012 hits and the Mayans were right and everything starts to go to hell, then maybe you know how to make baskets and collect herds. Like, I'm just, and also in terms of the number, like clearly it's going to be horrific in terms of what people are going to end up seeing around them, with people dying or themselves dying. But I wonder if agriculture and all this civilization is the worst thing that's ever happened to humankind, whether it's not more useful to just allow, well, not that we really have control, but allow as much mass die-off to happen as is necessary, so to speak, to bring us back to a hunter-gatherer culture, or whether it makes sense to try it and save people, so to speak.
Anybody want to tackle it?
I could back. Well, first of all, I mean, who's going to survive? It's obviously, in a way, those who perpetuate the disaster. So, if the masses that are going to die are the slaving masses, those who are growing cotton in Africa or rice in Asia or in the mines in Nova Scotia or whatever. So, in a way, it's like, if you let it kind of take care of itself right now, I mean, it's completely unethical, it's completely disastrous. It's sort of this fascist line, well, whoever dies deserves it, and it will kind of, we'll all either survive here or just, take off to Mars. They're the ones who are, selling the Earth on the Mars now. So in a way, it's like, it's not really the question here, I feel. The question is how to transmit to, I think it's too late, for the adults, but, for the future generations to transmit the instinct of life and diversity. And maybe what you or your friend in Croatia called spirituality is this connection to the other world that we do not view as our resource, as our profit. Maybe that is the spirituality. Well, if we lost it in our primitive existence now in these cities, in these boxes, well, where do we find that? That's the question. How are we going to really go for life, for diversity, for survival, for connection with what we don't see, what we cannot use? Well, that's, I think.
Thank you very much, and everybody who's spoken, thank you. My mind is spinning with ideas. It's been very stimulating. I admire the putting out the idea of primitivism and creating this stir of ideas, because yes, I sympathize with the idea of how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube. But if you think about transition, maybe the focus should be on studying the inner nature, and I don't know if what you meant was like the inner nature, meaning the psychology of primitivism, because I think that it's sort of like you have to respect history in a sense, and also